prove that by saying, God, I'll offer you more than my most basic needs of food by showing me that I'm going to give up food right now in order to prove that you are my greatest desire, nothing else. So I asked, what is our greatest desire? My next question is then, what is your ultimate? Peter, I think, asked some similar ideas a few weeks ago when he preached. But I want to challenge us, and as we just had here at worship, you guys were preaching the sermon for me, what are the things that we can identify in our lives that we might be called to fast from? So this is going back to those verses I just read, when Paul talks about kind of doing the opposite, contrasting the way that we're living our lives now. I think here's what he's referring to. Are you single? Maybe God is calling you to fast from seeking a relationship and to live in an intentional season of singleness to further his kingdom in ways that you can't do when you're dating or married. Maybe it's a good night's sleep. Maybe some of you are so strict in your schedule and getting a really good night's sleep, like I sometimes am, you're not willing to love alone, just have to carry on conversation late into the hours of the night. And you need to fast from your regulated ways. Maybe some of you it's the opposite. I know I fall into this one more often than not. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you do need a good night's sleep. Maybe your identity is starting to come from your grades or your work or how much you can get done in a day that you're constantly sacrificing sleep. God is saying, no, I want to bring you back to rest, to restoration of your body because it's starting to be unhealthy. Or maybe for some of us it's clothes that we wear, our appearance, and God is calling you to fast from your fashion. Or maybe it's money. How many of you are stressed about money? Once in a while, God is just calling you to fast from that, to turn away, to seek Him just for an intentional season of not worrying about your money and giving up, not just your worries, what that might look like for you. Basically, what is one thing that you have been distracted from in these just 20 or 30 minutes that I've been talking? What is one thing that has come up in your mind, distracting you from this conversation? Is it food? How often do you think about the next meal? I think about it all the time. How many times have you said, I am starving right now? And is that question ever appropriate when we're truly starving in the world? Or when the idea of fasting comes up, I've talked about this with my roommates before, but when the idea of fasting comes up, do you simply dismiss it because maybe it hurts your stomach, or gives you a headache, or you just can't do it? I used to fall into this category, certainly. But when Esther told the Jews in their time of need to fast for 3 days and 3 nights, do you think that they did it without any pain? Do you think that they did it was just like this easy thing, like, 3 days, 3 nights, about food? I did that all the time. When Jesus fasted for 40 days, I'm sure that was really easy on his body to go without food for 40 straight days. The reality is that it was very difficult. So when we look at that, we have to ask, how can we pick up our cross, as Jesus calls us to, without pain and suffering? If we do not suffer for the gospel, how do we know we really love Him? I want to briefly mention the story of Abraham and Isaac, because I think my initial perception of Abraham and Isaac when God calls them to sacrifice his son is that God was saying, Abraham, I don't really know where your faith is, if it's really in me or if it's in your son, your love for your son. So I want you to prove to me your faithfulness by being willing to sacrifice him. But I think, as I reread that story, I think God, in his omniscience, knew that Abraham was going to be faithful. He knew he was going to be willing to sacrifice his son, and he was going to stop it. I think he was doing that to show Abraham, to prove to Abraham his own faithfulness. So when Abraham went to sacrifice his son, he learned at that moment how far he was willing to go for God. He was willing to give his only son, just as God was willing to give his only son. How do we understand our own faithfulness if we are never sacrificing, willingly sacrificing things for God? How do we understand? How do we know we're willing to give it up if we don't? So what is your cross? What are you willing to fast for? How can it speak to us, or to the culture? Sorry. I think the other reason we also fast is to speak to the culture around us. Again, Paul mentions this in this chapter over and over. I'll give a quick example. Last year during Lent, I could sense this image consciousness of myself because I still do. I shave every other day because I know that if I start letting this grow out, it gets gross. And so I'm very image conscious, and I know I have to. I'm like so tense about it. And I don't want anyone to see what it looks like when I let my hair grow. It's nasty. So I decided it would be good to fast from that maybe for 40 days and to just let my hair grow out. So here's a before and after picture. On the left, you can see my donkey line on my chin. And then the right afterwards, when I shaved it off, I think much better looking. And then another example too. You can keep looking at that. It's a really good picture. It's interesting because a friend of mine who was going to my church was encouraged by what I was doing. She told me a couple years earlier, maybe a year or two earlier, she was feeling very similar feelings and just tired of the way the culture pushes how we have to look, and she felt her own sin in that. She shaved her whole head off. She has a beautiful head of hair, very attractive, and she just shaved her whole head off because she said, I'm done with this. I need to fast on this. And to prove to myself that I care more about God's view of me than what other people think of me. And I was very encouraged by that. So here's what I want us to get from this passage. I want to finish with this. I'm sorry if I've got you. I want us to dream, yes. Okay? I want us to keep dreaming of a better world, a better future, pray for our futures. I don't want us to think that we can never think about our futures. Yes, let's dream, but don't let those dreams distract you from where you're at right here, right now. I want us to fully embrace where you are as you are. Don't let the possibilities take away from the present and allow God to move right where you are as you are. Embrace exactly the position that you are in. In the microscopic scale, that means right here, right now. Who are you sitting next to? Who are you going to talk to afterwards in this tea time, snack time? Right here, how are you going to embrace that situation? In the larger scope, are you studying here as a student at FGF or working, whatever you're doing? So I said FGF, in Florence, so you're studying here. What are you doing here in Florence at this time of your life? And how can you embrace the people that you're living with, or working with, or studying with, or just living life with? Or even the macroscopic scale. Is that a word? I think it is. So for me, that is, I'm an architect studies. At Kent State, I live under my parents' authority and love and finances. I'm a member of a church called H2O back at my college, and as much as I'm promoting singleness right now through this passage, I'm in a relationship, and these are some of the larger areas of my macroscopic scale that I am living right now as a person. How can we fully embrace wherever you're at? How can we embrace what God asks you? It's sometimes easy for us to ask, where's God calling me? Without any solid answer. We can guess and hope and dream of what God is calling us to, future tense. I think that there is one answer that will always be true, and that is that God has called us to the here and now. In verse 17, the first one that Alex read for us, nevertheless, each one should retain the place in life that the Lord assigned to him, and to which God has called him. Present tense. We are called into the here and the now. Paul understands that this is truly the only information that we need in order to trust him. Listen, just because there is sin in the world, just because there's sin in the world does not mean that we can leave. The Corinthian church felt this. They wanted to probably, I think there was temptation to want to leave that sinful city, to leave that church. But there will always be sin. There will always be sin around us. God has called this church of Corinth to live and work in Corinth, despite the temptations that they had. Even though there were personal sin abounded, it was ultimately meant for his glory in some way for them to be there. So they needed to seek sanctification, to not lose hope, to not give up. So do you not let the culture define you? Do not lose hope because of this. their sin, because of your sin. God has you where He wants you. See the larger picture. So we see their identity. We see their unity, as I spoke of earlier. Corinthian church was very much focused on the individual. They had a hard time seeing the bigger picture, that there is a body that they are a part of. That they are just one member. And sometimes when we give our little complaints and details, we forget to realize that we are living in the midst of a much larger picture, a much fuller story, which God is so intricately woven in His beautiful plans. I want to briefly just state that the other day I was messaging one of my friends back in America, who's a close friend of my girlfriend, and they were saying that they just celebrated her birthday on Monday. They had ice cream, they had laughter, and they worship under the stars. And if you know me, these are like 3 of my favorite things ever, especially ice cream. Okay? I was really jealous. I was like, man, I wish I could be there. I wanted to complain. I wish I could be there. I live in Florence right now. Why can't I just be there, like, celebrating her birthday with these friends and doing these things? God has a much bigger picture. He has a much more beautiful picture in His mind. He wants me here for a reason. So I finished by saying that we are called, we see this in this chapter, we are called to learn the secret of contentment. It's my last thing I want to say. Paul, his words in Philippians 4, he says he's learned this secret to contentedness, to be content in all things. What's the secret? I love secrets so much. They excite me. I really want to know when somebody says they have a secret. I really need to know it sometimes. I think when Paul describes this secret to contentedness, he's saying that we need to understand our identity is apart from the world. We are saints and not sinners. Saints of God. We are His unified bride, His beloved children, who cannot be separated from His love by anything. See that in Romans 8. And He is our faithful husband, our trustworthy Father, the one who will never fail, never fault, and never make mistakes. He knows exactly what He is doing, and the one who fully trusts in His perfect plan and understands, they understand the secrets to being content in everything. So I'm going to pray. Is that it? Lord, I just want to thank You for these words of the Corinthian letter. That You just use Paul and his knowledge and his wisdom and his understanding of this culture and this church to speak so much truth, not just to them, but to us in our lives right now.